Well, welcome back to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. This is my twice weekly webcast. It's show number 318. It's Wednesday, 22nd of March, and it's turning into a reasonably bright day outside the window today in London. Let's hope it stays that way. It's been a bit miserable since I got back from New Zealand. Kevin's looked in. Good morning, Kevin. Good to see you. Well, what have we got for you in today's show? Bunch of stories. The first one is about a police chase in London that has ended with a rider dead and a passenger injured. No further details really on that. A pensioner has been jailed for chasing and ramming a biker off the road. Just Eat are to cut paid delivery jobs with the company in a switch to the gig economy. An off-road trip in New Zealand has ended up with a helicopter rescue. Islington Council have also sneaked in an unannounced charge for bike parking in public bays. Meanwhile, down in Bromley, box junctions have netted that council £2.5 million in 1 year. Rather more constructively, police have approved street races in Jakarta to replace illegal events, and they're proving reasonably successful. We'll have a quick look at new indicator alert with a built-in delay. And finally, today's discussion point, I'll be asking, why is it that the Evening Standard are making money with an affiliate link promoting non-approved motorcycle riding kit? So stay tuned for that. That's right at the end of the show. First things first, a little bit of housekeeping. Don't forget that that's the wrong thing. Let's just get this one up. That's the one I wanted. Yes, the next events from Survival Skills. Online talk series. April's event cancelled from March because I was actually out of the country. That will be pre-performance preparation and getting ready to ride. The previous video online that I did on the sort of psychology of riding, I got some very good thumbs up from people who were there for that one. So hopefully if you followed that particular broadcast, you'll be back for the April one. Wednesday the 5th at 8 p.m. is the time for that, and then I'll be covering the science of being seen once again, May the 1st, and again 8 p.m. That'll be the full presentation with the latest updates. £5 a seat for all those and both those events. If you can't make it live, don't forget you can come along after the event for at least 72 hours after the presentation, and you can book all these events through this particular link, which I'm just about to pop on screen for you. So hopefully see a few of you along for that particular event. Right, so anyway, what else? Well, the first story is a fairly depressing one. A motorcyclist has died following a 2 a.m. police chase on the A13 here in London, which ended in a crash. The motorcycle had 2 people on board. It was being pursued by officers after it failed to stop, and what's described as a fatal collision happened at 2:20 a.m. on Monday morning. Now, it's not entirely clear what happened, whether this was a so-called tactical stop where the police car actually hit the bike, or whether the riders lost control and hit a parked vehicle or collided with another car or van or something. I simply don't know the answer to that one. The information on that is fairly scarce. But unfortunately, despite the efforts of officers and ambulance that attended, the 30-year-old man was pronounced dead at the scene. His 29-year-old passenger was taken to hospital. His condition is said to be not life-threatening. Now, the Met's Directorate of Professional Standards has referred themselves to the Independent Office for Police Conduct, and they have been advised that the Independent Office, in fact, will be conducting an investigation. Now, meanwhile, Graham Robinson, a 69-year-old pensioner from Kinmel Bay in North Wales. Now, he's been jailed for 8 months for a road rage attack on a motorcyclist. He pleaded guilty to dangerous driving and obstructing the police. Now, the whole incident was actually caught on Robinson's own dash cam, and you can see the moment that he hit the bike from behind here. Now, the bike was being ridden by Liam Guest and Robinson had been crossing the bridge from Rhyl to Kinmel Bay in slow-moving traffic when Guest overtook the defendant. Now, Robinson claimed that Guest had hit his wing mirror. Robinson's window was apparently down at the time when the pensioner allegedly shouted abusive language at the rider and spat at him. He was said to have shouted, "I'm going to knock you off your bike." And the result was a pursuit, with Robinson's dashcam showing that he reached 50 miles an hour as he chased the rider from the main road and onto side road. Guest attempted to escape up a dirt road to the rear of some properties, but it looks like it turned out to be a dead end blocked by the trees in front of him. And Robinson continued to chase him up this dirt road and eventually rammed the bike from behind. Now, Robinson's barrister told the court that what he did was completely out of character and that he was highly unlikely to be back before this court again. Yes, well, the judge, Timothy Petts, he told the pensioner that he had reacted in a grossly disproportionate way when the dispute with Mr. Guest began, and he'd used his car as a weapon against a vulnerable road user. He added, for anybody to use their car as a weapon, as you were doing, to settle a grudge with a more vulnerable road user is highly dangerous, and the sentence has to reflect that. So along with the 8-month jail sentence, Robinson was handed a 3-year and 4-month driving ban and an extended retest. You were driving completely out of control. It's no thanks to you. The injuries were not more serious than they were. So, a fairly depressing story there. Don't forget, if you have any comments, any questions, anything you want to ask, I will try to get back to you during the show if I possibly can. If not, sometime after the show finishes, I will respond. And right, so what have we got next for you? Well, if you know the show, you'll also probably be aware that I've been commenting fairly regularly on the so-called gig economy and the appalling driving on the whole by delivery riders working for the companies such as Deliveroo and Uber Eats. Now, it turns out that Uber Eats had actually previously sought to differentiate themselves from the gig economy rivals by offering jobs for their riders with reliable wages and sick pay in 6 UK cities. But they've now announced that they're going to be axing around 1,700 of those delivery rider jobs. And it seems that the majority of those will be in the UK. And the move, surprisingly or not, follows a slowdown in takeaway demand following the end of the COVID epidemic. Now, Just Eat spokesperson said the company will transition away from the worker model for couriers, which is a small part of our overall delivery operations, and that there will be no impact to the service provided to partners and customers. Our top priority now is to support impacted employees and couriers. So, Just Eat, which is an Anglo-Dutch firm, it has around 15,000 workers globally, and the cuts are part of an overhaul designed to improve efficiency as they seek to reduce costs. They say there's been a 9% slump in customer numbers over the last year as diners returned to pubs and restaurants. Now, Just Eat shares have also fallen by around 15% this year, which may, of course, be what's driving this move. So it seems also around 170 full-time staff within the operation itself are also impacted. And according to reports, the delivery workers have been offered 6 weeks' notice with full pay, while office staff will begin the process of redundancy. Could be that they get moved to other parts of the business. Company officials have also said at Deliveroo that they would be cutting 350 roles, which it says is about 9% of the total, and that is in a bid to react to what they called unforeseen economic headwinds. Now, I would agree that the war in Ukraine, the economic downturn, the inflation, that could hardly have been foreseen. But it's hard to believe that food delivery companies didn't predict the end of COVID would reduce food orders at home. Anyway, hey ho, that's what's going on at Uber Eats. Now, do set a reminder, this show goes out hopefully live Wednesdays and Sundays at 11 o'clock. This is BST there. It will change to summertime in the very soon future, just a weekend away, I think. So do set a date if you possibly can, Wednesdays and Sundays. And don't forget, you can always catch up on my YouTube channel, UK. Don't forget that all important UK on the end of survival skills are where you won't find me. Now, as you probably know, I haven't been able to run the show for the last month on a regular basis because I've been out in New Zealand. And in fact, I only got back to the UK a couple of days ago. Now, one of the things that always strikes me about New Zealand as a country is just how quickly you can be out of a built-up area and be straight out into wilderness. Now, for example, the Akataroa forest is just north of a town called Upper Hutt, which is sort of a ribbon development north of Wellington, and the forest itself isn't really more than about 40k north of the city, but it's actually totally off the road network, and that of course makes it a destination for off-road riders and hikers alike. But the challenging terrain doesn't come without risk, and on Friday last week, two men who were planning to ride motorcycles from the Hutt Valley side of the forest to meet a friend at a mid-forest bunkhouse called Orange Hut, they came to grief when one of them injured his knee. Now, the pair, who were both in their 30s, they failed to arrive at the hut by sundown, so their friend who was meeting them became concerned and raised the alarm. And so two police search and rescue members, along with a 4x4 club member with extensive experience in the area, began to search along the route that they were due to have taken, and they were found about 3 a.m. on Saturday near the bottom of a steep section of track in a remote valley which is dubbed the Devil's Staircase. Seems to be quite a few Devil's Staircases around. Search and Rescue Duty Officer Detective Constable Elissa Higgins said the pair got into trouble whilst trying to come up a challenging climb. And she said a lot of people have been caught out in that area over the years. It's incredibly steep, slippery and rutted. One of the men injured his knee whilst trying to haul one of the motorcycles up a steep drop. Due to the injury, he wouldn't have been able to move the bikes any further, and he would have had great difficulty walking out. Now, the area was apparently hit by heavy rain on Friday, which must have made things even more difficult. But the pair were said to have been well prepared. They had sleeping bags, food and warm clothing, and they were also able to start a fire before the rain set in, and they managed to build themselves a shelter to keep them dry using ferns. Once they realized they weren't going to get out, they stayed together and stayed put. They made themselves quite visible and easy to find, Higgins said. The injured man, Ryan Campbell, was then rescued by helicopter, and Higgins further urged anyone planning on making these kinds of excursions into the outdoors to get a personal locator beacon. That's how off the beaten track you actually are out there. Now, where one leads, others follow. That's the case on routes like that one I've just talked about in New Zealand, but also it happens in other ways too. And for years, motorcyclists in the UK have enjoyed free parking in public bike bays when car parking nearby has had to be paid for. But with many car parking bays now being converted to payment via phone app, and the paper tickets that we used to buy via the sort of little slot machine, those are vanishing. And it hasn't taken councils too long to realise that they can now charge for bike parking too. So what are we seeing? Well, here's a picture of a motorcycle parking bay. The latest to impose a charge on parking in public bays is Islington Council, and they rolled out a new £1 per day charge for bikes in these bays, and they did it unannounced early last month. Now, MAG, Motorcycle Action Group, are upset with the charge because they say it was imposed with no prior consultation or engagement with riders whatsoever. And they say that the intention to charge for motorcycle parking was buried in a 300-page document on the council's general finances, and so nobody actually got to see it. And Islington has in fact confirmed that there were no responses from motorcyclists on this process. So the council claims that they didn't need to consult because it was a change to existing charges. Now, MAG refute this particular claim, saying that there was no prior charge, and previously it was free to park in designated motorcycle bays in Islington. So this claim that it's a change isn't true. Now, if riders wanted to park outside of the bays, then a residence permit was required, but they point out that there's actually been no change made to the cost of those residence permits. So a spokesman for Greater London Mag said this is a clear attempt by the council to bypass democratic scrutiny. They've seen what happened in Hackney and wanted to avoid the uproar. And Mag generally is arguing that this is a totally unacceptable way to treat their resident motorcyclists and people who ride to work in the borough too. And they've asked for the rollout to be paused, but the council have apparently refused. So Greater London Mag is set to meet Islington Council to oppose the charges, but they claim that they and the South London Motorcycling Action Group, those are the people who have been fighting the charges in Hackney, you may recall, they've actually persuaded the council to make one change, which is to let local residents with a permit for parking within Islington park in these public bays elsewhere in Islington for nothing. They say otherwise Islington residents who wanted to ride to work and park in a bay in the borough would have had to get up every morning to book a new parking session. Now, the meeting with the council is now scheduled for next Monday, that's the 27th of March. Meanwhile, the only sensible thing to do is actually check your local bike bay to see if a parking charge sign has gone up overnight. So this is the sort of thing you need to be looking for. If there's one of those perched by your bay, you will have to pay for your parking. So this is likely to be a change, I suspect, which is going to happen right across the country. Now, don't forget, if you do miss any of the shows, just pop over to coffee.com/ or / I should say, survival skills. You can see all my posts over there, and you can also consider supporting my work, which keeps these shows coming out to you. What else have got that running? Let's turn that off. I've got a couple of comments there to look at. Kevin says, allegedly many delivery riders have false ID and false docs or otherwise riding illegally. I don't know how many, but that is certainly true. In clampdowns, riders have been found in some cases sharing an identity to ride a bike, so the bike's in use 24 hours a day pretty much. And Kevin says he calls for a ban on L-plate riders who ride for work purposes, and I thoroughly agree with you. The Dispatch Association, which once upon a time was the go-to organisation for dispatch companies around the UK, back in the 80s, actually ensured that members didn't use learner riders. And this was in the days, of course, when learners could ride 250s. So that's how long ago it was. It seems that the food industry has managed to sidestep those guidances. Depressing, really, isn't it? So anyway, frankly, I think that £1 to park in a bike bay really isn't much of an issue, but I suppose it's the thin end of the wedge, and certainly Hackney wanted a ridiculous amount of money to park the bike in their particular bays. But anyway, it all pales into insignificance when you compare it with the fines being issued for stopping in yellow box junctions. Now, changing the legislation a few years ago meant that local councils have been handed the power to enforce some minor traffic offences, including illegal right turns is one of them, and also stopping in the yellow box junctions. And they are enforced with cameras, and if you transgress, you get a fixed penalty notice. And it does seem that some councils have been taking full advantage of this change in legislation. Now, the fine for stopping in a yellow box is a maximum of £130. It's halved if paid within 2 weeks. There is there are no points attached to it. It is a penalty from the council. Now, I've already in a previous show, a year or so ago, mentioned Hammersmith and Fulham as handing out millions of pounds worth of fines. But now a Freedom of Information request has revealed that Bromley Council raked in no less than £2.5 million in 2022 from no less than 25,425 fines that were issued to road users. Now, that's up an astonishing 10 times over 2021, when just 2,427 fines were issued. So presumably that's new coverage of box junctions. Now 70% of that total of 2.5 million and actually came from fines relating to just 5 box junctions, and one in particular, between Croydon Road and Langley Road in Elmer's End. It picked up no less than 8,118 fines in the year. You can work that out fairly easily. It's about 25 a day, according to my bush mathematics. Now, the council say they've no wish to issue any penalty charge notices, and that when enforcement commenced, this was publicised, with information also being published on the council's website and various rules outlined in the highway code. So easy enough, you might say. Just plan ahead when you're driving so you don't have to stop in a box junction. But it's not always so simple. Now, last year I was attempting to move clear through a box junction in Hammersmith, and I had an empty space in front of me, which is what I was aiming for, but I ended up having a confrontation with an Uber driver who had set off alongside me, then realised that the lane of traffic that he was in had stopped again, and that he was about to be stranded short in the box junction, which was one of the ones I happen to know has a CCTV camera on it and happens to be one of Hammersmith and Fulham's big earners. So what happened was, he presumably knew that too, because he swerved towards me and tried to force me to stop short of the empty space. I have to admit I wasn't having any of it, and made my way into what I considered to be my space, and he really wasn't very happy about it. Lots of shouting and swearing at me out of the car window. Anyway, another box junction, which was south of the river somewhere, I can't quite remember where this was, Richmond possibly. An independent traffic expert had looked at it, and he claimed that the light sequences between 2 nearby sets of signals had been deliberately set so as to entice drivers to follow the queue of traffic from the first set of lights and then leave them stranded mid-junction when the further set changed. And in Bromley, the Labour councillor, Jeremy Adams, he claims that the Conservative-controlled Bromley Council is using Elmer's End as a stealth tax on motorists. And he says that the signs are invisible to oncoming motorists because they're behind a bus stop and frequently obscured by buses. Now, not surprisingly, the Tory leader of Bromley Council, he refuted that, and he said that every single borough in London, no matter who has control politically, has adopted the power to use these CCTV cameras to issue fines for box junctions and other illegal manoeuvres, and that Bromley was actually the last to do so. But he did say that the council is going to place an additional sign to warn drivers about the box junction behind where the buses stop. So at least he's accepted that there is some fault there. Right, okay, so Nigel's looked in. Good to see you, Nigel. He says, just caught you, glad to see you back. Yep, I am indeed back. I got back on Thursday night, was it? I can't remember now. Or the days have rather passed in a bit of a haze the last few days. Right, okay, so switch countries over to Indonesia, and Jakarta has been plagued with illegal street racing of bikes and cars too for years. But in an attempt to sort of tackle this problem, the Jakarta Metro Police have been staging their own drag races for motorcycles since last year. Now, back at the end of January, the 5th such event was staged, and it actually attracted more than 1,000 participants, majority of whom were former illegal street racers. Now, bear in mind that these events are actually held on the public road, just with the connivance, if you like, of the police. They shut the road down to allow the event to take place. Now, one rider, an Aidan Lintar, he says, I prefer competing in formal races because they are safer. We don't have to worry about getting arrested or running into oncoming traffic or pedestrians crossing the streets. He said that he'd been racing his motorbike for money nearly every weekend, often in the dead of night to avoid the authorities, and that he'd actually personally lost count of the number of times he'd been arrested. But now it seems he has a proper racing suit. He has logos of a company that are actually sponsoring him, and so that's a one-up, he says, on the old worn-out jeans and a hoodie that he used to wear. Now, Linter goes on to explain that the reason that illegal street racing exists is because there are no facilities where motorcycle enthusiasts like him could compete safely. Jakarta's traffic police actually said there are at least 39 locations where these illegal street races have occurred, and they are now the focus of regular police patrols. And the frequency of these illegal races has been declining since these formal events have been staged. So there are still instances, of course, of illegal races on the streets, but it's said that they now involve very much more limited numbers of participants, and the ones involving the huge crowds of racers that used to turn up are said to be rare. Meanwhile, several municipal governments are starting to look to emulate the Jakarta police move to stage their own formal racing events to tackle the same problem in their own cities. Now, the illegal races were a chance to earn substantial amounts of money through bets. One racer said that he could have pocketed around the equivalent of $3,000 US, which is 10 times what he can earn through prize money for a legal race. But on the other hand, he says he doesn't take the risks that he did in the illegal street racing. Now, currently, the Greater Jakarta area only has one racing circuit, and that's in Sentul, which is nearly 50k south of the city centre, and it is open for the public twice a week, but it's said that it's too far away for most people. And what they called on the government to do is actually to create places where people can compete off-road. One rider said that if every city had a drag circuit, I'm convinced there wouldn't be any illegal races. So, all right, that's an interesting one from Jakarta. Now, okay, moving on to an interesting little technical item that's gone on sale. Now, back when I was working with a buddy in basic training, there was one regular fail point on the bike test, and that was forgetting to turn off the indicators. I'm sure that a few of the people who are listening probably done the same themselves. I certainly have on my own bikes. Now, but it's a particular problem when people are coming to learn to ride. There's a reason for that. Most people who learn to ride these days, excuse me, are car drivers prior to getting onto a bike. They're used to self-cancelling indicators, and they're also used to hearing the audible alarm, a sort of click or a sort of buzz, when the lights and when the indicators are on. They also, of course, have lights flashing on the dashboard. Now, the only warning on a motorcycle is a flashing light. And I found with most motorcycles, it's often well below the eye line of the rider. Excuse me. That was particularly a problem on MT-07 I rode a few years ago. And one thing I've also noticed is that some years ago, about 1990s, I think, bikes changed from using a yellow telltale, which was relatively bright, to a green telltale, which in daylight is actually pretty damn difficult to see. So, not surprisingly, learner riders actually turn corners and they forget the manual cancel that's necessary. Now, on test, the examiner will normally give the rider a few seconds to realise that they haven't turned the indicator off and cancel it. But if you happen to turn a corner and find yourself approaching another junction fairly quickly and you still got the indicator flashing away, then it's going to be a test fail almost certainly. And if it happens to be a car waiting, then the examiner will normally have to step in and tell you to cancel it, which is definitely a test fail. So what I did with the bikes that we had for training was I just simply fitted a very basic 12-volt buzzer directly across the indicator relay, so it buzzed when the indicators were on. Now, the fail rate from our forgotten indicator issue, it plummeted overnight. One examiner wasn't too happy with them, but an audible alert isn't illegal. Now, how much did it cost me? Well, it was around £2 per bike for these buzzers, although they weren't waterproof. I think I only ever replaced one, despite, of course, using the bikes in all weathers and washing them down frequently too. So I have to say, I've always had a bit of a giggle at those kits that you find online. Which do much the same. They will package up a 12-volt buzzer. They'll usually give you some clip ties, clip-on sort of junction connectors for the wiring, and give you some zip ties to stick it all away neatly. And then they'll sell it in a cardboard box, and you'll pay out the damn sight more than you would do if you just bought the buzzer off eBay. And of course, if there is a problem, there's always a complicated and over-engineered, if clever, solutions. One I found, for example, online not too recently was an app-controlled unit. Now, you connect a little Bluetooth device to your indicator circuit. That then sends a signal to your Bluetooth communicator, which then alerts you via the speakers inside your helmet, of course, if you have the app and the your own in-helmet speaker system as well. So, you know, it probably works, but it just strikes me as massively overcomplicated. And I've just seen another which delays the alarm for 15 seconds after the indicator's turned on, which sounds like a good idea, because basically it means you don't have a sort of a beeping going on underneath you under normal circumstances. The eventer said that he found he was indicating for about 8 or 9 seconds before he made a turn, and then he said he figured that 6 seconds the other side before you should have cancelled your indicators. And so that's what he set the buzzer to come on at. So 15 seconds after you started indicating, the buzzer alerts you that you haven't turned them off. Of course, what happens if you're stopped at traffic lights? Well, presumably the alarm starts sounding straight away, although the explanation didn't go that far. But, you know, the question I would ask is, why are we having to fit DIY kits or add-ons like this in the first place? I've always found it a bit odd that with all the electricity which is being attached to modern bikes, which started, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, it's 30 odd years since my Yamaha FZ 750, lovely old bike. I do miss that one. It had self-cancelling indicators, which worked pretty well. And I haven't ridden a bike with self-cancelling indicators since. So why aren't manufacturers fitting this technology themselves? I really don't know. If you've got any ideas what the answer to that might be, I would be interested to hear them. Right, one comment from Nigel. He says it's very wrong there are no advanced warning signs of box junctions. Many of ours in Bexley you cannot see until you're on top of them, obscured by hills and bends, or so poorly painted that they're not visible in the dark or wet. Coupled that you just cannot do right turns on, vision of oncoming traffic and pedestrian lights, so you have to turn left, then block the road by turning right. Funnily enough, actually, I noticed a box junction the other day, which was almost invisible due to wear of the paint. It'd be interesting to see if you could appeal that in court. Of course, the trouble is what the council will do is they'll probably have a photograph of the junction in perfect riding conditions when it all is perfectly clear. I got caught going through a bus. It was an emergency gateway. I hadn't realised that the two narrow gaps either side were the ones I was supposed to go through. Because A, it was dark, B, some of the street lights in the area had failed, C, the sign on one side of the road was blocked by a rather large porter cabin that was surrounded by cones, and the one on the other side of the road was blocked by a van that was parked on the double yellows very close to the gateway. I should have gone through. I didn't have any film of the incident, of course, and the council sent me a photograph of everything in broad daylight with nothing obstructing the view and said the signs are clearly visible. Right, okay. On to the final point today, today's discussion point. Now, the question really here is all about who we can actually trust for reviews of bike kit. Now, whilst I was doing my usual trawl through my biking news feed, one of the things I came across was an online feature on the Evening Standard website who were looking at motorcycle trousers. Here's the link so you can see it for yourself. Now, the trousers that caught my eye were actually inexpensive and they were being sold on Amazon. And again, I'm just going to pop the link up so you can pop over there and have a look at that in a moment too. Now, the reason they caught my eye was the title of the description: Text Speed Men's Motorcycle Waterproof Over Trousers, Motorbike, Moped, Scooter, Rain Biker Pants. And so reading that, the words that obviously stand out are waterproof over trousers. So let's have a look at what they are. I'm just trying to press the wrong button here. Here we go. That's the right button. So there we go. They come with a waterproof membrane, as you'd expect from a pair of waterproof trousers. And one interesting feature is that they actually have that full-length zip on either leg. So that does make them easy to slip over whatever else you're wearing. So you can see the riders put him over a pair of denims there. But it's worth checking the material that they're made with. It's 600 denier cordura. Now that happens to be typical of a lot of abrasive resistant riding suits, the sort of synthetic bike suits that we might buy for riding in town or on the open road. And anyway, the other thing is that 600 denier is going to make those trousers moderately bulky for a waterproof over trouser. They won't be thin like the slip-on proof nylon leggings that I usually use and replace every year. And the blurb does in fact state that it's a high abrasion resistant material and claims that it offers skin protection. Now, Moto Cap may have something to say about how good that 600 denier cordura is, but let's move on from that and have a look at the next photo that I have for you. Let's just zoom in on that one so you can see it in its all its glory. You'll see that what it says is that there is CE approved armor, and those little red patches on the knees are indicating where it is. Hopefully it's a bit bigger than that because that looks very, very small. But anyway, the point was that this rang some alarm bells, and I did actually double check with clothing expert Paul Vansbury, who's a regular visitor on here, and he said, after looking at the ad, quote, "Since they are fitted with knee protectors, these trousers fall within the scope of the PPE regulation and are required to be tested and certified. If, however, they were sold as over trousers with no capability to have impact protectors fitted, they would be exempt." So, okay, there you are. Now, I noticed on the first slide I showed you, let's just pop back to that one, and just quickly put that one up on screen. You'll see that these trousers, it says they've been sold globally since 2003. So basically 20 years these particular trousers have been on the market. Now, the thing is that since they mentioned the skin saving abrasion resistance of the cordura, and they seem to have forgotten that the trousers actually have both the pockets and the actual fitment of CE armor, it looks to me very much like what the company are trying to do is market these items, which they know aren't approved as protective clothing, by attempting to slide sideways around the CE regulations by talking about these trousers as rain pants. Now, the fact is, as I say, if they removed the armor and removed the pocket that you can put the armor in, they would then be within the rules and they could market them unapproved. But what's kind of more alarming to me in some ways is that the link that the Evening Standard used for these text speed trousers is actually an affiliate link. If you go to that Evening Standard address that I just popped up, you'll find a admission to this at the bottom of the page. It says the Evening Standard's journalism is supported by our readers. When you purchase through links on our site, we may earn an affiliate commission. Now, as Paul said, the Evening Standard appears not to have considered the legislation. I suspect they probably don't actually know about it. But the point I'm making really is that you can go to an apparently reputable source like the Evening Standard, read their review of a piece of kit, and go and buy it on the the thumbs up that they give a piece of riding kit, and you may be in for a bit of a shock. So I would say is to actually know the rules and check each and every garment yourself. So if you don't know the CE rules, time to go and find out what they are. Now, one other comment's come in. Nigel says he has a timeout device on his Tiger's indicators, works well with a hold when the brakes are on. He said he did nearly fail on MOT when I left the bike with them timed out, and he never pushed the cancel button. He was quite happy and intrigued when I showed him. Okay, so that sounds quite a complicated little piece of equipment. I doubt it came as cheap as my £2 buzzer. Hey ho. Anyway, isn't it? Up to you. What do you fit? I'm always one for simple solutions and saving money myself, but there we go. Right, okay, so that's pretty much it for today. Thank you once more for looking in. Don't forget, you can catch up with all these shows on my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK. Do look in over there if you possibly can, if you've missed a show. I should be back, all things being equal, on Sunday with the next show. I've already got quite a few stories actually for that one. I've been trawling through some of the ones I missed while I was out in New Zealand, and there have been one or two interesting ones. So if you are out there today, thank you very much for looking in, and I will see you in due course. And if you are out there on the bike today, don't forget to ride safely and stay shiny side up.